Welcome to the Brilliantly Resilient podcast. What's your train wreck? Everyone has one. The question is, are you going to live there or are you just visiting? Let's check in with Mary Fran and Kristen to learn how to come through not broken, but brilliant.
Hey everybody, Mary Fran Bontempo here. And before we get started with this week's episode, did you know that Brilliantly Resilient can come directly to you? That's right, we have keynotes, programs, presentations, workshops, all available to companies, associations, conferences, and organizations, either virtually or live in person. So head on over to brilliantlyresilient.net at the speaking tab to find out more. And while you're there, you can also sign up for our weekly Brilliance Bit, which comes to you once a week directly to your inbox and has a bit of brilliance from this week's show and will keep you living in a brilliantly resilient mindset. Okay, let's get on with the show. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Brilliantly Resilient Live. I'm Mary Fran Bontempo. My partner in crime, Kristen Smedley, is off doing some brilliant work with her nonprofit and her gene therapy that's going on there. So I am flying solo today, but boy, do I have a good partner in the seat next to me. I am so excited to have Donna Marie Hayes with us today. First of all, I'm going to give you a lot of Donna's background here by way of introduction, because it's important, I think, to what we're going to talk about afterwards. So Donna is an author, and that's what we're here to talk about today, of These Broken Roads, Scammed and Vindicated, One Woman's Story. But Donna is also a performer, an actress, a cabaret singer. She's an HR professional, and she's a coach who helps women shed victimhood. Donna Marie, I am so happy to have you here today with us. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you for having me. Such a pleasure.
So I have to first ask, do you prefer to be addressed as Donna Marie or Donna? The reason being, I am Mary Frances, named after grandmothers, and I don't want to insult anybody. So what works for you?
Just Donna is fine.
Okay. So Donna, one of the reasons that I wanted to give a lot of your background when we're diving into this, I think when we see people or meet people or view them on social media or whatever, we tend to compartmentalize them based on what we see in that moment. The consequence of which is we often think that a couple of things. Oh, that will never happen to me because that person is different from me, or I'll never be able to recover or rise to a certain place because that person is not me. I mean, people look at me and they don't see the mother of a recovering heroin addict, as I'm sure they would look at you and not see someone who could be scammed. So I think it's important to show people all the sides of us. Do you find that to be true?
Absolutely agree. I mean, I believe we all wear masks. We all wear masks, and I, when I worked in corporate America, for example, I was a managing director for an international investment bank, one of the biggest foreign banks, and I was at one of the top corporate titles. And when you look at me, professionally, I'm doing really, really well. But personally, I was struggling. So it's really important to take a look at the person as a whole and really not draw conclusions at all.
So to that end, do you think that we also see ourselves in a certain way? Because what happened to you, I'm sure you thought, well, that could never happen to me because I'm this, that, and the other thing, which precisely is what can sometimes make us vulnerable.
Oh, yes, I agree with that. And I didn't see it as a scam, because when you think of a romance scam, the traditional, I hate to use the word, the traditional scam is, someone who you've never met, someone who's hiding behind a computer screen in a faraway land with a sob story, and someone who's vulnerable sends money to this person, and it's really someone behind a computer, as opposed to someone who's sleeping next to you for 18 months, pretending to be in a relationship with you. And when it all falls apart, you really see it for what it is. So sometimes I always thought I could never be that person who would send money to someone who I've never met. But here I am, and it happened to me. It just happened in a different way. So I don't think we can predict or draw any real conclusion about what could happen to us or what won't happen to us, because you don't know the set of circumstances that would probably allow that, and what kind of state you're in, how vulnerable you are, how are you showing up in your life? Are you showing up diminished? Are you showing up with self-limiting beliefs, or some of your childhood traumas seeping into your adult life? And for me, it was kind of a mixture of all those things. So it's hard to say, well, what will or will not happen to someone. It depends on what's going on.
I'm scribbling notes here because I think all of those things we bring with us every day, but they're not in our consciousness. And that's probably good, because good Lord, could you imagine the voices in your head?
Right.
But at the same time, you make a very valid point that because we bring all of this with us, we can't really make hard and fast statements about how we're going to react, or what we're capable of doing or not doing, or where we are in any given situation. So how do you proceed then? First of all, I want to get into your story, and then I want to talk about, after what you've learned from yourself, how do we figure out how to move forward once something like that happens, knowing then that there are all these moving parts that we really have to be aware of. So tell us about your story, and then we'll move on from there.
Sure. So I was born in Jamaica, West Indies. I was raised by my grandmother and step-grandfather, and my parents were here in the States. I really didn't know my dad. I knew of my mom. I really don't have a lot of childhood memories of her. She would visit, but the few times that I mentioned in the book, but I had such a need and a yearning for my mom and my parents that I would pray to their pictures. Oh. And I would, and I thought they could hear me. I would get on my knees every night and I would pray to their pictures, and I would tell them about school and the chores that I did and what a good girl I am, etc. And in the book, there is a picture of a letter that I actually wrote to my mother when I was 5 years old, introducing myself, because I didn't understand how parenting worked. I didn't think she met me. So I said, I was introducing myself to say, hi, my name is Donna. I'm your daughter. I would like to see you one day. But I didn't make the connection that she had to have seen me at some point. And, when I moved to the States, I immediately was immersed in this church, this Pentecostal church. And my mom was not, she's not a warm and fuzzy person. She's not the type that will make you feel supported. It's good enough that you have a roof over your head and you have food in your belly. That's parenting as far as she was concerned. She wasn't going the other route. And in this church, we were not able to do any of the things that a quote unquote normal teenager would do. For example, I've never been to a prom, never been on a date. We weren't allowed to watch television. Sports were prohibited, couldn't listen to secular music. So I was in this bubble. And so you know how children would pray for the weekends? I'm ready for the weekend. I would pray for the weekdays. So at least I could go to school, where I was being bullied mercilessly, but that's a completely different story. So I think, and to marry someone, you had to go to the pastor and get permission to marry someone. You weren't allowed to date. There was no hand holding or kissing or dating.
Okay, so how did that work out?
Yeah, you'd go to the pastor and says, this is someone that I'd like to marry. And he would go to God and God would say yes or no. And so, it was like this bubble. So when I left the church, I actually ran away. As you can see in the book, I ran away at I was 19 I was 20 going on 21. And it was a world that I didn't really understand. I was just so deprived of what it was like to actually be alive in the world. I remember after I married my first husband, asking him, was it okay if I turned on the television?
Oh my goodness.
Because I didn't think that, I had the right. I felt as if I didn't have any rights. I felt very diminished. So whether directly or indirectly, I was led to believe that I was really nothing. And that followed me. And so when I got into these relationships, as long as they were nice to me because people weren't usually nice, or being very affectionate, because that's something that I never really had. I kind of overlooked certain things and just focused on the things that I felt that I needed. And that's a pattern that followed me. And I felt I had to do extra to be worthy. And so even after surviving, and going up the corporate ladder, that little girl was still there, hanging on, hoping. And I think that reflected in some choices that I made.
I think that is such a valuable insight, because it's interesting that you say that. I occasionally go back in my mind, true confessions of sounding a little bit crazy here, but I go back in my mind to myself as a child, and I do see those patterns of a lot of them fear-based. And not that I grew up necessarily in an environment that made me afraid, but I think you take on the things that naturally you learn. Kids are sponges. We absorb, we take in what's around us. And I too, in looking back now, and a lot of my decisions that I made through my life, recognize that there is something there that we really have to acknowledge and be aware of, because our lives are made up of the bulk of our experiences.
Exactly. That's exactly right. And in my book, I talk about when my mom visited and my sisters were there, and I was so happy because now I can, I grew up with my cousin Sherlock Holmes. I don't know if you've read about him in the book, but my cousin's name was really Sherlock Holmes. And I was just so happy not to talk to the goats and the cows and the pigs, because my grandparents were at the market. I was just this little girl roaming, and I always felt so lost, as if I really didn't belong to anyone or anything. And I remember when my sisters came to stay for about 2 years, and my cousin Sherlock, those 2 years were just phenomenal. We played, and I had people to talk to, and eat with, and go to bed, and what have you. And when my mom came and just took them, didn't say they were leaving, just said, okay, get your things, you're leaving. And I remember sitting on the veranda feeling so isolated, and as if I really was not worthy to go. I was not good enough to go. And that kind of followed me. So yes, a lot of our childhood traumas absolutely seep into, subconsciously, into our lives. And I show up, in this way. And I had to really do the work to kind of find the other way back.
And that's so important, because, as with everything, self-reflection has two sides. You can you can be a navel gazer, where you're too into what you're feeling and thinking.
Right.
But that element of self-reflection, especially when it refers to those patterns that we consistently see ourselves doing things that can really be destructive. And you unfortunately found that out in a big way, because everything that you're telling me, that idea of isolation, of overlooking things because someone is kind to you or is nice to you, one of the things that I think we have to understand, and you obviously learned this in a big way, is we can't base our reactions to other people purely on what we think or what we would do, because just as we bring things to our relationships, so do other people. So tell us about your experience with this person that you loved, and how all of these things played into, first of all, you being scammed, but then second of all, you figuring out, okay, this is what happened and this is how I move beyond that.
Yes. So, when I met him, I was 54, and he was my third relationship, any sort of relationship, in 54 years. The prior 2 individuals were my 2 ex-husbands, who were very, very, the second one more so, very, very abusive. So I took 8 years after I left him, and I really focused on myself, and I challenged myself. I completed the marathon.
Wow, that's impressive.
In the New York City Marathon, I completed it. It took me 6 hours, but I completed it. And I started singing, and I started performing, and I started really practicing self-care. I went into therapy, and I thought I was ready, but I felt lonely. I wanted companionship. When you get to a certain point in your life, it's a different experience sitting in the movies, watching the movies by yourself versus having someone to share that with or going out to dinner. I wanted that companionship. And I think maybe it was because of where I was in my life, or maybe because I never really had it. Because if you'll see in my book, my two husbands were absent people. They really weren't present. And so I got rid of that second one, and now was the time. And someone suggested, well, why don't you try online dating? And I said, don't know much about that. And she said, it's a website for only folks over 50. So I'm like, okay, folks over 50 are usually individuals who are set, content, grounded, and, hopefully mature. And I gave it a shot. And I met a few people, but he was the only one on that site that I actually went out with. And we had our first date, and I really liked him. He was very charming. He seemed really interested in me and what was I about. He talked a lot about my job and about my life and my daughter, and talked about his sons. I now know that the reason he asked so many questions, because he needed to create his little plan and information that I was giving him. I now look back to see how he used some of those things against me, because he knew that I had just been through this terrible situation, and he was just a savior. I'm there to help you. I'm there to care for you. I'm there to kind of, make you forget about some of these other things that have happened. And we went hiking. I don't hike, but we went hiking.
But he was broadening your horizons, and it was also wonderful. And
I ate it up. We would ride the Staten Island Ferry just to ride the Staten Island Ferry. We went to a lot of escape rooms and dinner. It was just such a magical time for me. And I said, okay, I'm going to give this guy a chance. And whenever I would question myself, I would explain it away. I would say, that's just the trauma talking. That's because you just went through two terrible things, or your mom, or bullying, or whatever may have happened. That's just you reacting to that. Life is short. Enjoy it. And that's kind of how I talked myself through it until it all came to this horrific end.
I'm so relating to what you say, because when my son was going through many of his struggles, and before the ultimate overdose, which got us to finally look at it, I often say to myself that I was best friends with distraction and denial. Because when something's happening and you feel that, and the other thing I say is, ladies, we have women's intuition, and it's a thing.
Yeah.
It's a thing.
It's a thing.
You really do not pay attention to those little niggling doubts. You have to get to the bottom of them, because otherwise we do exactly what you did and what I did. We deflect, we explain away, because who wants to live in more trouble? But if you don't tell yourself the truth and look at the truth, that's exactly what you're inviting in. And plus, you did a lot of the things that we all tell people to do. Oh, take care of yourself and spend time alone and ground yourself. So you're figuring here at this point that you're on solid ground.
Yes, I really did. I really did. I thought those 8 years of just being by myself prepared me for this. But, I just got sucked right in, because he was so nice, and because I needed that, and I needed it to be real. I wanted it to be real. So I kind of talked around it. I deflected, as you said, and really said, life is short. If you're having a great time, have a great time. Who knows? And so I went along with that. And towards the end, I realized that I was only being primed and groomed throughout.
I'm not a patient person, but this guy had patience.
He had a lot of patience. And he wanted me to believe that it was true, that he carved my initials in his chest.
Oh, God.
He carved my initials. Who does that if you're not really truly with someone? I'm not talking a little one, like big D and at the musical note, the treble clef in the middle, and H. Just so he says, I love you that much that I want to spend my life with you. You've really changed my life. And, and so I believed it. I didn't really see the signs until after it was over that I'm going, wow, he went all out because he figured I was a big payday. So therefore he had to do a little extra.
That is, it's so sinister.
Sinister.
And to find yourself ultimately enmeshed in that. So tell me what happened. And tell me, I can already imagine how it affected your psyche, because I'm listening to your story and I'm just shrinking inside listening to this. Yes. So I can only imagine what it did to you. But tell me what was the denouement of the story? How do we move through the drama?
Yeah. So I was looking for a house, and he had a family member who owned a property. This family member is an attorney, and I think he was a co-conspirator, but that's maybe another book. And I was doing a lot of traveling. He was practically living with me. He had moved his stuff in. Most of the time he was spending here. So I went to look at the house, and I decided to invest in the house. But he kept talking about this house. Anyway, I decided to invest, and I turned the money over him to handle the renovations. Mm-hmm. That was it. Turn the money over to him, and he would give me a play-by-play, because I was traveling a lot for acting. I had some acting gigs on the West Coast, and at night he would say, "Oh, today we put in the whirlpool, and today we put in the island." And you know how you love flowers. I made sure I put a garden right by the front there for you. Because he says, I know when you come home, you want to see the flower bed garden like your grandmother. Why does he know about my grandmother?
Oh my gosh.
I talk so much about my grandmother. Like you want to have it just like your grandmother's flower bed. I put all of your favorite colors. You're going to love it. And then he would say, oh, and you know where you want to have the piano, that little room, I'm going to put this special window. So he would tell me about arguments that he had with the workers and how they're taking too much time for lunchtime. And, I want this to all be finished by June 1st. And I said, send me a picture. That was a sign. Send me a picture. He says, well, you saw it unfinished with your own eyes. It would mean so much to me if you would see finished with your own eyes. And I was like, okay, that's sweet, I guess. He goes, please do this for me. Please do this for me. And then when it was time for me to see the house, and I want to give away too much, and he timed it as well. He made sure that everything happened right after I had foot surgery, because he knew that I could not move around. He knew I was having foot surgery. He didn't. When I woke up, I said, where is he? And they said, no one's here. He didn't come. He knew that I was having foot surgery, so he planned it around that. But anyway, after all of that happened,
I want to hurt this man. I just want to hurt this man.
And so when I realized what happened, when my attorney says, you know what, I hired an attorney in Connecticut, because that's where the property is. He said, you know what, it's not far from my office. Let me drive down. And he drove, and then he called me and he said, Donna, the property wasn't finished. I'm like, oh no, I'm sure you went to the wrong address. I gave him the address again. He goes, no. And he sent me pictures, and I said, that's the house. And there's nothing but litter on the yard, in the yard. I'm like, well, maybe they didn't, and even then seeing it, I was saying, well, maybe someone didn't come in and clean up the litter. How are the tenants? He said, there are no tenants. And I remember just saying, no. And then it was around the same time where he called and told me that his mom passed away. I don't want to give away too much about that as well.
Goodness.
Yeah. I don't know if you know I don't know if you read that part when he told me that his mom passed away. So I started explaining again, well, his mom just died. He's in a bad place. I am sure there's a wonderful explanation for this. I'm sure, but I kept reaching him and he wouldn't contact me back. And then it dawned on me, wonder if he called my lawyer first of all and said, prove it. Prove that she gave me money. Prove it. And even threatened that if I took any sort of action, that he would make up stories that I told him stuff about my company where I worked, which I wasn't even worried about because I would never do that. And I remember saying to my lawyer, but that's not him. He's such a kind, wonderful, I'm sure he's having some sort of breakdown because his mom just passed away. And then I remember grabbing my crutches and hobbling over, grabbing my laptop, sitting down, going back on the website. And there he was with a new name, new profile name. Yeah. New profile name. And in one of those pictures, he was actually wearing one of my running shirts. New name, saying he's an accountant. And that's when it settled into me what had happened, what really happened.
Oh, Donna, I can't even imagine.
It was devastating because I absolutely, really cared for him. And I thought I was in a 18 months. And I just called the EAP service at my firm and I got a counselor. I would call night after night, just sobbing, until one woman said to me, throw him, it's money, you can make more, he can. Throw him back on the pile and just keep living your amazing life. Don't worry, he'll implode one day in lots of bad decisions. And that's when I got the strength and I said, I'm going to fight. Because normally, because of how I was raised, I would steer clear of anything that was confrontational, any chaos, because I wanted to kind of keep the peace. But I'm wondering now, whose peace am I keeping? Certainly not my peace.
I love that.
Whose peace am I keeping?
I'm scribbling again. Whose peace?
People say, let's keep the peace, but whose peace? It wasn't my peace. And so I went to the FBI and I went to the police and I went to the district attorney and I did all these things that was uncharacteristic of me. And that's kind of where I found my power. I filed a lawsuit. He didn't show up, so I got a judgment against him. And this is not in the book, but March of this year, they found him. He had a girlfriend all through this. So that's why I think she was a part of it. He had a girlfriend all along, and he lives upstate with her. They found an account with his name and froze the account and sent all the money to me. He then called the enforcement person to say, please don't take all of it. Can I do a payment plan?
I mean, just the gall and the nerve.
He was a catch me if you can type.
Yes. Yeah.
He was a catch me if you can. But I had to do some self-reflection. And I had to look at myself and I had to look at how I was showing up and why it was so important to be in this relationship with this man. And I came out on the other side. And then immediately after that, I formed a company, Distinguished Coaching, became an ICF certified coach, and started coaching women.
So there's so much to unpack here, but
I know.
what I really want to kind of focus on for the brilliantly resilient aspect of this is, first of all, we say becoming brilliantly resilient is a process.
Yes.
Like you don't just get there one day and go, hey, I'm brilliant, I'm resilient, and I'm never going to have another problem because I'm walking around with this headset. Because the truth of the matter is, we cannot shed in its entirety what we've been through and what we've experienced and what we grew up with. But we can, as you said, reflect on those things, number one. Number two, tell ourselves the truth.
Yes.
Like that is huge. Yeah. I say that all the time.
Huge.
Our perception, which is one of the parts that we talk about in Brilliantly Resilient, our perception of things is not always the truth.
Yes.
And once you finally, unfortunately, realize the truth, when you are armed with that, and you go back and you understand why things happen with you, then you can take action.
Correct. I always say I'm a sailor who went through some rough waters. I got through it, and now I'm a better sailor.
There you go.
Now I'm a better sailor. Yes.
And more equipped to be aware and recognize that all of these pieces of you are nothing to be. If we look at life as this journey, and we look at our experiences as things that enable us to not only go forward on our own, but then to serve others, which is what you ended up doing.
Yes.
That's a huge piece of it. Then I think, don't you think it takes away some of the shame that we felt if we can pull back and see, okay, first of all, my partner and I say, we're not going to tell you that your sucker punches were a blessing because they sucked. I mean, let's just put that out there. They were awful.
It was awful. But I started talking to a lot of women in the gym, in the stores, in my office, and I learned about so many other women who were in similar situations, not the traditional scam, but some were engaged to people, some were even married to people, and they became engaged and they married that individual just to steal. One woman ended up in a shelter. One woman had to go back to work in her 60s. And there was a young woman whose boyfriend took out a lot of credit cards in her name and sent her into bankruptcy. And this was someone that she was very, very close with. What was common, the common thread was shame. I didn't talk about it. I don't want to talk about it. I just want to leave it behind me. I don't want people to think that, I should have seen what was happening. And in that moment, the Donna, who would normally shy away as well and say, yeah, I don't want to talk. I says, no, I'm going to tell the story. I am going to tell the story. And I am going to, so now with all the charges that I filed against him, the next woman who may just Google his name will see what he did. And
again,
hopefully we'll get another
taking notes here, because that was one of the things that I decided, because I am not this is dumb, kind of a silly thing to say, but I was going to say I don't fit whatever the traditional model of what the mother of an addict would look like, but that's for one very important reason, because there is no model of what that person looks like.
Correct.
And that's what we have to understand. So the shame thing, which is what these people prey on, can actually become our power. If you look at that and you go, you know what, this is what they wanted me to feel.
Yes.
And I'm not going to I'm not going to bite.
And that's what he was hoping for, because he would tell me constantly, you're such a kind person. You're such a nice person. You're scared of everything, because things that, I said, let's not do that. Let's help this person. Let's help that person. Let's do this. So he was banking on me doing that and for some reason, it was such a stunning situation. I mean, I was like, what? And I found my power in that. I'm like, I am not going to be ashamed because I didn't do it. He did it to me.
Exactly.
I'm not going to wear your shame. It's your shame. You wear it. That's
perfect. You're not going to wear his shame. And I love that. Here I am scribbling again. I'm not going to wear your shame. You need to start I'm going to send you all of a list of your brilliance bits here, and you just take them out and you just keep saying that stuff over and over again. I'm not going to wear your shame. And I think that's, again, it goes back to our fear to bring this conversation kind of full circle, that people won't see us the way we want to be seen.
Yes. Here I was in boardrooms doing major presentations. I was on a few television shows. I was singing and acting and, have all of this stuff going on. How am I going to say I was scammed by this criminal?
Exactly.
What will that do? And I decided that it still happened, whether you accept it didn't happen. How can I repurpose it? I call it repurposing my pain.
Exactly.
How can I repurpose it? How can I take this and use that to benefit someone else? So I call it repurposing pain to benefit others. It happened, yes. It's in the past. I went through therapy and I'm healed, but now I'm using it in the book and in my coaching practice to help to repurpose it to help others.
Donna, this conversation was just so not only enlightening for me, but also validating and empowering, because every single one of us have had experiences that we would like to forget because they made us feel less than.
Yes.
And it's so important to look those things in the face and say exactly what you said. This happened. One of the things that we say in Brilliantly Resilient is you have a decision to make with your challenges. Are you just visiting them, or are you going to live there?
Live there. Exactly.
And when you make the decision that you're not going to live in that place, then your mind begins to work on solutions. You begin to take your control and your power back, and then you can act. Because I think that's one of the other things that these situations do to us. They kind of try to trap us in inertia, where you don't know what to do, so you don't do anything.
Exactly. And that's what that's what I have done historically. And the book started, the initial title was Last Run Along These Broken Roads, and we cut it to just These Broken Roads. And the reason was last run. If you notice in my book, I was always running. I ran from my mom, then I ran from my first husband, then I always ran. I didn't face it head on. I ran. And I'm like, this time I'm standing my ground. I'm going to deal with it. I'm going to deal with it for what it was. I'm going to work on myself, but I am not running. I am not hiding.
I am so proud of you, even though we just met.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So this conversation has been nothing short of amazing. I want to tie it up with a few things. First of all, you have Tamron Hall on your calendar. So
Yes.
at this recording, that is upcoming for you. We're going to try to figure out when we can, put these things together to just give you that extra push
Great.
with your story, because I think you need that and want that. And it's so important for women to hear. And to that end, I want everybody to know where they can find you and where they can get the book.
Sure. The book just came out yesterday, October 3rd. It's available wherever books are sold. You can get it at Amazon and Walmart and Barnes and Noble and Target, wherever books are sold. You can find me on I have a website, Donna-Hayes.com. My coaching practice is distinguishedcoaching.com. And you can find me on Facebook, Donna Hayes. On Instagram, I am Donna Hayes. On LinkedIn as Donna Hayes. So I'm on most of the social media platform, but people can reach out to me, whether it's on my website or on any of the social media platforms.
Donna, thank you so much for this truly brilliantly resilient conversation.
Great.
Readers, please go out. All of our listeners, please go get These Broken Roads, Scammed and Vindicated, One Woman Story. It is a fascinating read by a fascinating woman with so many lessons for all of us, regardless of what our challenges, train wrecks, sucker punches, as we call them here at Brilliantly Resilient, what they are. Donna, thank you so much for not only sharing your story, but in using it to help other people to, again, empower them and take control of their lives. I'm so grateful. Thanks for joining us.
That is my one wish. Thank you for having me.
I appreciate that. And if you are still looking for another little bit of inspiration, go to brilliantlyresilient.net, sign up for our Brilliance Bits. Donna will be featured on one of those Brilliance Bits, which is where we take a piece of the brilliance that our guests have dropped on us and give that to you in a 1-minute read, which helps you to live a brilliantly resilient life with a brilliantly resilient mindset. We'll see you next time, everybody. Thank you for joining us here at Brilliantly Resilient.
Thanks for tuning in to the Brilliantly Resilient podcast. Join our Facebook group and follow us on YouTube to be inspired with tools to reset, rise, and reveal your brilliance.